Hello, welcome to the Step Stories podcast. I'm your host, Robin Breuner, and I'm really looking forward to my conversation today with my guest, Barbara Sabido. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Robin. How are you today?
I'm good. Looking out at a very rainy day after a beautiful weekend, but always glad for the rain around here in California. So, how are you
Yes,
today?
I'm good too and feeling the same way about our weather.
I know. It's keep that fire danger down. Keep the rain coming, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll take it as long as we get it.
Exactly. So I'm so happy to have you join me today. You have a special kind of blended family history, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it. And I asked you, Barbara, to be on the show today because you do have an incredible history as a foster parent. And I know you've not had a step family, but you've most certainly had a major blended one. So we're going to start talking about that. But I thought first, maybe you could tell me a little bit about you and your history, because I think your childhood experience sounds like really influenced how you became a foster parents in a lot of ways. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. I am the youngest of 7 children, and every time I share that little piece of information about myself, people aren't used to hearing about big families anymore. And
Yeah.
so when I share that, I get this really interesting reaction. And I think the next question is always, well, what was that like? Did you like it? Blah, blah, blah. And I have to say, I loved it. I had a great childhood. I have 3 older brothers and 3 older sisters, and, just like a week and a half ago, I was down in Southern California having dinner with all of them and their spouses. We try to get together, see each other regularly, especially now that the wedding season seems to be over
Yeah.
for most of my nieces and nephews. But I had a great, and I would say typical, childhood. And the older I became, the more I became aware that I was not, um, my experience was not what everyone else experienced. And my husband and I, his name is Tom, we've been married like 37 years, and we have 4 biological sons of our own. Um, I just started to realize that my experience was not everyone else's experience, and I really wanted to do what I could, in my small capacity, what I could to introduce a little bit of what I experienced in my childhood to other children, and that very naturally led me to foster care.
Well, you're right. To have an idyllic childhood seems like it's a little bit more rare these days than the norm. So you're
Yeah.
very fortunate, and how wonderful that you're still close with all your siblings. And I do know, just to digress, my daughter's getting married, and I come from a big family. My husband, her fiance, it's like, oh boy, trying to plan a wedding with a lot of family is such a blessing to have so much family. I adore my family and my
Yes.
husband's family, but, it proved, it's challenging when the guest list comes around and you don't have too much space, so
Yes. Yeah. So
anyway,
far, we've been
yeah,
lucky.
well, that is good, and, I find over and over, especially doing this podcast, that it is amazing how often our childhood experiences, influence who we are as adults, and I've really experienced that on with how I parent and how I'm a wife, and so it sounds like this, influenced you in a really positive way to go out and become a foster parent. So how did you get your start doing that?
Well, it had been in the back of my mind for several years, and I don't really remember the sort of the birth of it in my head, but it was something that I always sort of entertained, though I didn't share it with anyone. My husband loves telling that story that I never told him I wanted to do this, until we were at or I was at a little league game with my second son, and I was just sitting next to another one of the moms who had a child on the team, and she had 2 small children with her. And, you engage in between innings or in between any action, and I just asked her, "Are these your children as well as the one on the field?" And she said, "No, these are my foster children." And it just immediately clicked with me with that, "Oh, this is someone I could get some really good information from." And as it happens, this foster mom, has fostered, over 100 children in her
What?
home here in San Rafael. Yeah, there are a
Oh
number of
my
yeah.
gosh.
There are a number of foster parents in Marin who have fostered over 100 children. It's a calling to them. And,
Wow.
every social worker will tell you that they are appreciative of the family who takes care of 2 children. They're appreciative of those foster families who, you know, can over the years foster over 100. So it's really not about quantity in my head. It's more about the quality of care that you get to
Mhm.
provide those children. But again, in Marin, we are very fortunate to have human beings who are called to this work and who really want to do it um, over the long term. And
What a blessing.
I happened to meet one of the best at a little league game, and she was just such a fan of, foster care that I think within the next 2 weeks, I was at an introductory meeting, and then my husband came to one with me, and then we were involved in the weekend training, and soon after that, we got our license.
So he was on board with it from the beginning also?
Almost, almost. His main concern, and it's interesting that this is probably the main concern of most of the if you have a man-woman couple doing this together, typically the man's concern is getting so attached to the children that it's really difficult to say goodbye. I have
Mm.
found that to be across the board, an overwhelmingly accurate statement about it, and that was my husband's fear, was that saying goodbye would just be too hard for him. And my husband is a police officer, um, retired after 32 years. He has seen a lot and done a lot, and yet I found it so telling and so beautiful that saying goodbye to a child was something that he didn't know he'd be able to handle.
Hmm.
But after our, uh, training, he started to really see that the way to say goodbye is to understand your role in this child's life. And your role really is to accept the child from their biological family and take care of them for however long they are with you, and then to safely either return them to their biological family or to see them move into a forever family with or via adoption.
Mm. So I mean, I understand that about having to say goodbye, and this sounds so trivial compared to what you're talking about, but I worked as a volunteer for 5 years at guide dogs for the blind, and I thought about fostering over and over, and I thought, "I won't be able to say goodbye to these puppies." It's really, your heart when your heart's involved, in
Yes,
whatever way it
exactly.
is, it's really hard. I find it interesting that it's more the males versus the females
Yeah.
who've been mothers who are able to be clearer about it. And what about your kids? So tell me a little bit about your kids and how old they were when you started.
Yeah, that was a really fun thing to go through with them. Our licensing, social worker was wonderful, and one thing that she loved to do, it's required, but the way she did it was just so beautiful, is you have to everyone who lives in your home has to be interviewed prior to becoming licensed, and so she had to interview my 4 children, who at the time of the interview were, I think, 11, 9. 7 and 4, and it just aligned quite well with after-school snacks, so she came over and just sat around the dining room table with my sons while I exited the room because they want to just have complete, authenticity from the children without the parent kinda leaning in to hear or to try to direct a conversation. So I left the room, and I could just hear a lot of laughs and a lot of conversation, even from our youngest, talking about, um, how they thought they would handle, another child in the home. But, subsequent to that conversation with the licensing worker, I kinda said, "Boys, what did you tell, Miss Cindy?" And they said, "Oh, we said we like babies, and we thought it would be really fun to have another one in the house." Because that was our focus through, our 17 years as foster parents, is we focused on newborns and up to the age of 6. That was just a sweet spot for my husband and I, and for the boys. They enjoyed the little ones.
That's taking on a lot, a newborn and infant when you already have 4 young sons. I mean, that you're an incredible person, for doing
Yeah.
that and putting your heart out there and your husband and your kids. What an incredible lesson and model you've been for them.
Mhm. I hope
And so
so.
you mentioned your 17 years. How many kids did you have over those 17 years?
17. Isn't that, kind of funny how well that worked out? Though it was not 1 child per year. We had up to 3 children at one time, or we would have, like, a year and a half break. It just kinda
Mm.
depends on the number of children in need, if their age aligns with the age that you have committed to. Um, and at one point, the one time my sons asked for a break, I, of course, had to say yes because they had
Mm.
never once asked to not do it. But they did at one point ask if they could have a summer without any foster children. And that short summer break actually turned into probably a 15 or 16-month break during which I actually just wasn't even called to foster anyone. But you can still be busy as a foster parent without having a child in your home because Marin has a very, very vibrant foster care community. So even if you're not fostering a child, you could be called by another foster family to provide respite care, which is just a fancy word for babysitting someone else's foster child. And you can get involved with some different nonprofits that support foster children. So you can always be busy outside of not having a foster child in your home when you join this world.
And so you essentially had 17 kids in basically 16 years is really what you're saying as far as the concentration. I mean, what was the
Yes.
average amount of time would you say you had a child?
Oh gosh, we had one little one for 24 hours. It was such a
Mm,
short little stay because his aunt was called to see if she could take him, and of course she said yes, but she needed 24 hours to kinda get her life ready to take in her nephew, but the minute that she could, I was meeting her at Children and Family Services to do the transfer. She was so incredibly eager to have her nephew in her home. So the
mm.
shortest was 24 hours, and the longest I had, 2 brothers with us for an entire year before they moved into an adoptive home. So, if you wanna do the math and that average, but if I looked at all of them, I'd say the average was about between 6 to 8 months.
Mhm. Did you have, siblings come together very often?
Only that one time. I only
Okay.
had that sibling group once. I had, a baby this age and a toddler this age at the same time, but it was only that one sibling group that, stayed in my home for a year, and they were so fun. They were so delighted with all the different experiences that we were able to give them, and my boys, I think it was my oldest in particular that became particularly close to those 2, and after they were
Mm.
adopted, he would go with us to watch them and their younger siblings and their adoptive brothers and sisters, um, play football and go look at go watch their own sporting events, because once you establish that bond, it can be really difficult to just sever it the minute they leave your home.
Well, you had mentioned that to me, that that's one of the things that you have continued to do, right, is to stay in touch with whether they go into an adoptive family or go back to their bio parents or, what else? You said something about staying in not staying in the foster care system.
Oh, but
Do they
sometimes well, being let's see, they're either adopted or they move back in with their biological family,
Yeah.
or they sometimes become, part of a legal guardianship with a family member who doesn't quite feel comfortable adopting their sibling's child, but definitely wants to be the legal adult responsible for them for the rest of their life. Um, but we always left it to the family that was taking the children into their home, whether they wanted to stay in touch with us, because that
Mm.
can be a tricky situation. The
Yeah.
biological family, when the children are reunified, they don't want to be reminded that they had their child removed from their home. Um, they just want to go on. They just want to kind of forget that
Mm.
chapter in their life and kind of resume being a family to that child. And
Mhm.
so I don't think we ever had a biological family who wanted to remain in touch with us, the foster family. If we happen to run into them in the community, and Marin, as you know, it's a small county. So the
Mhm.
chances that you're going to run into that child and their biological family again are really big. You're gonna run into them again, and they always seemed so pleased to see us, and we in turn were so happy to see those kids thriving with their biological family. But we've had, several of our adoptive parents want to stay in touch with us. And once the child was old enough to kind of make a decision, then, the parents always abided by what their adoptive children wanted to do. And some kind of grew up and said, you know what? We love Tom and Barbara. Let's email, let's text, let's send photos, but we just don't need to see them all the time. And others have, thankfully, because we have fallen in love several times, other families have been really generous in letting us continue to be part of those children's lives. But you
Mhm.
have to respect the biological family or the adoptive family's wishes because they want what's best for those kids.
Of
And I
course.
think that has to be the focus of every foster family is not what I need, but what that child needs.
Mhm. When your husband being a police officer in the community, he must have had a unique perspective on doing this, and seeing troubled families out there and dealing with those situations. So, um, how did that affect him, besides the fact that he fell in love and had a hard time saying goodbye, but how did his job affect him at home in this way?
I am very blessed that my husband is very good at compartmentalizing the
Mm.
different parts of his life. And when he went back to the locker room after shift and took off that vest and the duty belt and came home, he ceased being Officer or Sergeant Sabido and he became dad and
Mm.
my husband. And so he was always able to not bring his work home with him.
Mm.
The few times that it did unwittingly blend was either when he was involved in the removal of a child from their home and
Oh.
had to make it clear to the social worker who responded and was part of that removal to say, "Okay, you can't call us. for this child because I was already involved in their removal, and that could be considered a conflict of interest.
Oh, of
And
course.
in fact, that did happen the very first time we got called by the social worker. Um, it was for a child that my husband had just removed from the home, and, the dots just didn't connect with that social worker about the last
Mm.
names, so we had to sadly decline bringing that child into our home, and then we had one child who was very fearful of law enforcement. She had
Mm.
seen more than a six-year-old should have seen, um, as far as interactions between her parents and law enforcement was involved, and so we waited until she was really comfortable with us before we told her that Tom was a police officer. We made sure he
Oh,
didn't drop by on his lunch hour in his squad car in uniform, and funnily enough, that one girl and my husband became very close. She preferred Tom over me any time of day. She just really loved my husband. And so we look back and we're really glad that we kind of protected her from that knowledge until she and Tom had established some trust between the two of them just before we decided to expose her to the reality of what he did for a living.
that's very intuitive and thoughtful. And as I'm listening to you, I think it's a gift that hopefully somebody who was fearful of law enforcement will now grow
Mm,
up with a different perspective on that. So that's something you gave to her beyond
mhm,
all the other things you did for her. So,
mm. Thank you
and
for that.
of course, and in the middle of all this, not that you didn't have enough with 4 of your own young boys and all these foster kids, you also became the executive director of the Marin Foster Care, right?
I did
Yeah.
through just another funny set of circumstances where there was just a need and I had the time to fill it, and that kinda grew into a full-time position, and I loved it. I loved being that immersed in the foster care world and being able to help foster kids and foster parents beyond what I was able to do within our home.
Mhm. Well, you had a lot to juggle, a lot of responsibilities at the same time. That's very inspirational and
Yeah.
impressive. And I'm curious just because a lot of our listeners are from all over the place. So
Mhm.
often I will get guests from Northern California or California. But did you, in your experience doing that as the director, learn much about the foster programs across the country? Is Marin different in some of the other
Mm,
areas, or just curious for people listening who are being inspired by this?
mm. Well, and as part of my, you know, journey in the foster care world, I was also one of the teachers of Marin's foster care licensing class. I partnered with an amazing social worker who just knew the system and knew her job backwards and forwards. I would say I learned so much from her just being her co teacher because she focused on sort of the legalities of social work while I focused on the reality of having a child in your home. But beyond that, I'll be honest, I did not learn a lot about foster care in other states. We did work really closely with a number of other nonprofits here in Marin and in the Bay Area that supported foster children.
Hmm.
Um, and but beyond that, I have to give you a no, Robin. I'm so
That's
sorry.
okay.
I did not learn a lot. I do know that every department, whether it's called Children Family Services or Child Protective Services, they're all filled with social workers who really are trying to do their best. But in larger counties, those social workers have an enormous caseload. And it they need foster parents to sort of help those social workers stay on top of their cases
Hmm.
by the foster parents being extremely proactive in keeping their social worker updated on what's going on with the children in their home because the social workers are underwater in many of the counties here in the Bay Area, and I'm sure across the state and across the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of in literature, in the news, you read a lot about the difficulties with a lack of social workers, with foster parents who just aren't maybe of the quality that you are,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
these kids, you just really feel for them, and so
You do. You really do.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
is frustrating and heartbreaking when you hear about foster parents and social workers who turn out to not be the people that these children need. And it's very frustrating to know that people entered this world to not do a good job, but instead they actually add to the trauma that these
Mm,
children have already experienced. And I think
yes,
that's probably one of the greatest frustrations of, the thousands of really awesome foster parents out there who do it with very little recognition, because, as you know, our media focuses on the sensational stories and not on those stories of just people doing a good job.
of course. I mean, that's a thing across so many genres, and that is such a
Yes,
shame.
yes. Yeah.
I absolutely hate that. It's not
Yeah,
helping our
but
world by only
look
focusing on that.
yeah. But
But
look what you're doing, Robin. Look what you get to do
mm,
by
thank
highlighting
you.
things like this with your podcast.
Thank you very much. Well, I also want to talk to you because there's something else I want to move on to, which is what you're doing now. But before we
Yeah.
get there, because my podcast is about blended families, I do want to just talk about what you learned from blending your family with these foster kids, and what are some things your kids learned from it. And are they glad that they had this experience? Because this is another way of blending a
Yes. Yes, it is. Um, I learned I had to confront my judgmental nature. That was one thing that, became quite clear to me really early on because, when you first start in this work or you're just hearing about foster care, you immediately think about the flaws in the biological families, what
family.
they did that caused their children to be removed. And through foster care, um, gosh, I learned that these biological families are just going through something, going through stuff that I never had to. And if I had been exposed to the things that happened to them, I could have been a completely different person,
Mhm.
and I could have had my children removed. So it really made me rethink just how I view and react to other people who have had such a different path in their life. And I I hope it made me a better person by learning that. Um, gosh,
I
now
think
20 years ago.
I so agree with you, and I think that, one of the benefits of getting older in life and knowing more people and having more experiences are you do start to understand and see things differently that,
Yes, yes,
even seeing a homeless person and trying to think beyond what those poor people, what led them to that place, and not,
exactly.
it's just whatever. That's just one little example, but there's so much that we don't even understand that goes on with people unless you've been in their shoes or you've gotten to know somebody. So it's such an important lesson, and I'm constantly learning it as time
Yeah,
goes on. Yep.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's really important to take a step back and think about that judgment. So
Yes,
I'm working on it
yes.
all the time. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah, but you know what? Developing that self-awareness, um, can only help you, and it can only help everybody else that comes in contact with you, because if you know
of
who you
course.
are and who you want to be, it it just feeds into every relationship that you have. So, Um, and to answer the second part of that question,
Yeah.
we have
Mhm.
talked with our adult children, because now they are all adults, p post the foster care world, and, 3 of them still feel very good about the experience and, our decision to become foster parents, and just one has shared that in retrospect, he did feel a little sort of he missed some of that focused attention that all kids needed because we were so involved in the foster care world. But he
Mm.
also is very quick to say that he never said anything, and he should have, um, and that he recognizes that now, that he could have said something to us, and he didn't, and that was his choice. But, again, that opened up a really good um, conversation between he and I and my husband and he and his brothers. So, finally kind of releasing whatever emotions you've been holding on to for so long, that's never a bad thing. So we were
Mm.
really glad that he finally told us about that.
Of course. And of the 3 sons that didn't that enjoyed the experience, do you think any of them might ever foster a kid?
I think, ooh, that's a good question, Robin. I don't, you know what? I hope so. I don't, but I don't know. Again, it's just it's a big life altering decision to
Mhm.
make.
Mhm.
And I think I see at least one of them considering it. But again, that's also something that because they all have partners, and that's something that both people need to be completely 100% behind. There is no, as you know, there is no talking your partner into becoming a parent. It's either you really want to do this or you really don't. And it's the same thing with foster parenting. I can't talk. I couldn't talk my husband into it. He had to really come to a solid feeling of comfort with the decision himself, or we wouldn't have done that. And that's something that all my sons are going to have to do with their own partners if that's what they see themselves doing in the future.
It's a huge, huge selfless thing to do because just raising your own kids is challenging enough.
It's
So
challenging.
I
Yes.
I really again, you're an incredible inspiration. And
Oh,
speaking of that, let's talk about the other thing you're doing, which is so cool.
yes.
And it's a
Yes.
this is a blended family that you've created that's not within your home. It's you've been blended into a new
Exactly.
family.
Yeah.
You've
Yes,
described it that way. Yes. So
yeah.
let's talk about apparent love. What is
Yeah,
it?
thank you. Well, a parent love, so when we left the foster care world, it was just time. It was just time for us to do something else, and so many different circumstances pointed that out to us. But because we left the foster care world, it didn't mean that we were done, um, being part of a family beyond our own nuclear family. We wanted to do more, and the idea actually was born way back in 2017 when we were still, eyeball deep in the foster care world, and we attended our first drag show at Lookout in the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco. Our son was working there at the time as a bartender, and he said, "You guys have got to come to this show. It is so much fun." And we're like, we're on board. Let's do it. So we went, and it was, in fact, a great show. And, halfway through the middle of it, one of the other participants came up to us and said very kindly, "What are you guys doing here?" Because we did not fit in. We looked like, we were not blending in that place. And we said, "Oh, you know what? Our son is right behind the bar." And he said it was a great show. And he goes, "Dominic is your son? I love Dominic." And then he took my hand and he said, "Thank you so much for loving your son." And he said that he had lost his family the minute he came out, that his family made it very clear that they wanted nothing to do with him. because he was gay. And that just broke my heart, and we were driving home, and I said, "I have an idea for a nonprofit, and I think we need to give the LGBTQ plus community a family outside of the one that either they still have and is far away, or they don't have anymore because they are living their own authentic life." And, 5 years later, the opportunity to start our own nonprofit, was presented to us, and my husband thought of the name. It's called A Parent Love because we want to provide a parent's love to the LGBTQ plus community, and we want that love to be a parent. And
That's a great play on
we've had a
words.
blast. We've had an absolute blast. We've done big family dinners where I've cooked a whole bunch of food at our house and taken it to a bar. Again, look out in the Castro because they gave us their event room for free. And, 35, 40 members of the LGBTQ community would come and just have dinner with us. And we would talk for 3 or 4 hours. And sometimes we would end up going to a karaoke bar around the corner and having fun after dinner was over. We did game nights, movie nights. We've done small gatherings. We've done big gatherings. We've done some great holiday parties in one family member's backyard. Um, we've taken people on their very first backpacking trip because my husband and I love to backpack in the Sierra Nevada. And we've got another fun backpacking trip planned for this summer to take some members of our family backpacking because it's something that they always wanted to do and were never able to do it with
Mm,
anyone else. So it's been just a great experience for us.
good for you. That is I love that name, Apparent Love, and the play on words
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah,
It's
I have to give
perfect.
it to my husband. He came up with a really, really good one. And, the more I shared it with, our friends and our family, the more people came out and said, "Oh, we want to help you with this. What can we do?" And one of my board members, her daughter is a very talented graphic artist. And so she and I got together. She created our logo. She created our website. And I didn't know this at the time. She grew up with us, but she is also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And that was something that she felt comfortable sharing with me after she heard about our nonprofit. And she started
Hmm.
designing all this beautiful promotional materials for us. She even took my goofy idea for a Valentine because we did a Valentine station once at the corner of Market and Noe, right in the middle of the Castro. And she created a really fun Valentine that we handed out along with
Oh,
cookies and homemade dog treats. And again, just another really fun event that just kind of popped into my head one day.
gosh. Okay, so how can people find this if they're interested in joining?
We have a website. And it's pretty easy, apparentlove.org. We're on Instagram, and people should just go to our website and see what we do. There's a contact form, and just tell us what you need, and we will try to make it happen. Even if it's something as simple as meeting you for coffee or coming by your work and kind of patronizing the business that you work in. If just a short little visit with a parental figure is what you need to help you get through a day, we'll do that.
Hmm. I really love that. It's amazing, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe somebody who's listening to this will wanna start a chapter of this in another place. That would
Yeah,
be
or
amazing,
or
right?
just start doing it yourself.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
free mom hugs, free dad hugs, whether you just want to attend, because Pride is coming up in June. And if you want to attend, a local parade or just make yourself available, if
Mm,
not to your own child, then to your niece or your nephew or your cousin, just anyone you know who needs that assurance that you love them for who
mm.
they are. That
Well, I
would be
think that's
helpful.
a wonderful way to end this interview. I think
Fantastic.
that was perfect, and I guess I like to do this as we wrap up, but I wanna know if there's any final pearls of wisdom from
Um,
all these incredible experiences that you have that you might share about, just different kinds of blended families, because that's sort of the theme of today, different kinds of blended
yeah.
families.
Yeah. Well, yeah, don't get stuck in an antiquated definition of what your family has to look like. Be open to the opportunities that drop in your lap to be a mom or a dad or even a brother or a sister to someone out there who's looking for a family. And just keep that in mind that family can be anything you want it to be as long as it's sort of taking care of everyone in the relationship. That's a family.
Mm, perfect.
Good.
Such
Thank you.
that is a real pearl of wisdom, and thank you for all you do to make the world a better place.
Oh,
It's just
thank you, Robin.
so important to have people like you. So I really appreciate you, and thank you again for taking the time to be on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. It's such an important topic, and I'm so glad that this idea popped into your head one day and
Yeah,
you carried it, over home plate. Back to my
thank you.
baseball analogies. Yay!
Yes. All right. Go enjoy the rainy, cozy day inside.
I will. Thank you so much, Robin. Just
Okay. All
good
right.
luck in all your future podcasts.
You too. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.